So the reason why I have students start their verbal reasoning practice from paragraph argument type questions is that this is what is happening on the paragraph argument type question is what is happening at the core of the GRE. Or if I were to be specific, what is happening at the core of the reading comprehension section of the GRE. Sorry, the verbal reasoning section of the GRE. My bad. Okay, so within the verbal reasoning, you have reading comprehension and then you have blank type questions, which I will go into the detail of later on. Within the reading comprehension, the old GRE used to have super long passages and some medium one and some really short ones. So these paragraph argument are the really short ones, okay? They're the really short ones. And again, the reason why I have students start their preparation, their verbal reasoning preparation from these is because it's purely testing your ability to analyze data and to reason. And that's what is happening on the GRE as a whole, A, and that's what's specifically happening through text-based information on the verbal reasoning section of the GRE.
All right. So on the GRE, in the reading comprehension section, there are short passages, there are medium length passages, and then there are passages which are rather towards the longer side. They're not as long as they used to be on the old GRE, so you can call them medium long or slightly longer passages. Anyway, within the short passages, there's a super short passage which the GRE calls the paragraph argument or the critical reasoning type passage. You just have around 4 to 6 line passage, and you only be asked just one question pertinent to it, just like you can see on the screen. Before I even begin explaining to you how to approach these questions, how to ace them, and how to solve this particular question, I want you to go ahead and try solving this question that you can see on your screen within 1 minute and 15 seconds.
So here for the first at least 2 weeks, I would recommend that you follow the exact procedure that I'm going to lay down in a while. Okay. And the reason why I ask you to do that is because if you, I mean, if anyone who's watching has been a driver and has driven to a specific place from one place for an extended period of time, you would know that there's this uh, zone that you go into where you just do not remember what happened on the road and you just reach the destination. If someone asks you, like, if, for example, if you've been traveling from point A to some point B for 3 years, and if someone asks you in the third year to describe your journey starting from point A up until you reached point B, there wouldn't be much that you could recall. The reason for that is our brains develop neural patterns, which in less fancy terms is basically habit, right? And for the GRE, you will only develop the right habits if you make the right practice. And I emphasize on this so much because a lot of students come to me that we prepared from platform A, B, C, D, but we are still unable to get a good score. And then I have to actually put 3 to 4 weeks breaking their wrong or performance jeopardizing uh, neural patterns, habits of the GRE, right? Long story short, just do exactly what I'm going to tell you. Okay, so on the paragraph argument type question, like the one that you can see on screen, broadly speaking, the bigger classification of text could be done by classifying the text in two broad categories. The first one is data. Now, how can any written paragraph or any writing give you data? I mean, data could also be some form of information, right? It could be called a part of the premise, right? Um, Data could be some form of evidence, etc., etc. Basically, any any text which is undisputable, right? It's not someone's opinion, it's hardcore information. And of course, what's disputable would be then someone's opinion. It could be someone's opinion, someone's argument, uh, someone's position, right? So these would be the two broad categories of text that you would encounter on the paragraph argument type questions. Now, as I read, I am going to do exactly that, just to, put the the pertinent type in its column, right? And one might think, okay, that's going to take a long. Would we have that much time on the actual GRE? No. But then you need to develop the right thinking patterns, and for that, it's necessary to do this for at least the first 2 weeks. Okay, so let's read the paragraph. It says the amount of time it takes for most of a worker's occupational knowledge and skills to become obsolete has been declining because of the introduction of advanced manufacturing technology. Let's just call it AMT for the rest of it. Okay, so uh, if I were to summarize it, they're becoming obsolete quicker. They're becoming obsolete quicker. Why? It's happening because of AMT. How it's happening because of AMT, and why should AMT be causing that is something that we will not delve into for now, at least. Okay, then it says that given the rate at which AMT is currently being introduced in manufacturing, The average worker's old skills become obsolete and new skills are required within as little as 5 years. Is that the writer's opinion? No, it's not. It's just another piece of information. So there's no opinion or argument or position in this paragraph, argument question, in this paragraph rather. So yeah, with the rate they are pushing AMT or they're introducing AMT, workers need new skills within as little as 5 years. So within means, from 0 to 5 years. They need skills within 0 to 5 years. Okay, new skills are required. Right. Now so the first step would be to read the paragraph and to divide it in facts and arguments, right? To clearly identify what each line is. And the second one is always to make an action item, to make an action item out of the question. Let's see how we can do that. So, So which of the following plans, if feasible, would allow a company to prepare most effectively for the rapid obsolescence of skills described? Okay, so if I were to make an action item out of this, what would I do? I would probably say that I have to pick an option which shows what'll solve the obsolescency. I don't know if that's even a word. Okay, so now I clearly know the type of option that I'm looking for. I'm looking for an option which clearly solves this problem of workers, skills becoming obsolete and them requiring new ones within as little as 5 years. Okay, so let's read the first option. A, the company, and by the way, let me just add it here, and this is also super necessary to do. I told you how to read. I told you what to do once you read the question. Now I'll tell you what to do with the options. So for the options, I always recommend using the elimination method. Okay, what's the elimination method? The elimination method is where you basically put options in one of the three categories. It's confirmed correct, it can be correct, it's definitely not correct, right? And for the most part, you'd be crossing options out on the actual test, and then you'd be left with one or two options that you are confused with. And of course, you can make it easier for you instead of vacillating between options to just condense it down to 2 or 3 options, and then you can decide from there which option is correct. Otherwise, the GRE options are so confusing that if you do not clearly cross them out under the time constraints and in the pressure of the test, you just keep jumping from one option to the other, and then they always have something true in each option, and okay, that's a formula for anxiety. Not going that road. All right, so option A, let's now finally come to reading option A. The company will develop a program to offer selected employees the opportunity to receive training 6 years after they were originally hired. How would that help? I don't think that's going to help, because I have the information that they require new skills within as little as 5 years. So, I mean, if they're also the program that they're developing is going to offer selected employees an opportunity to train, and that too after 6 years. So A, they're not training all employees. B, they're going to do it after hiring them after 6 years. And we know already as a fact that they would be requiring most probably new skills within as little as 5 years. This is not happening. This is not going to fix the problem. Okay. Option B, the company will increase its investment in AMT every year for a period of at least 5 years. Okay, so let's say I'm the company CEO. I am trying my workers' skills become useless and obsolete within 5 years, and I have to solve that. And I'm investing in AMT. Now, does investing in AMT mean I would be bringing in more AMT if I do that? That's going to exacerbate the situation, make it worse. Does it mean I'm going to print new user manuals or something that's going to solve it? But wait a minute. I'm assuming I'm making a story. I'm going beyond the option into thinking what investing in AMT would mean. I do not know that. So we do not know what this even means. How would this even solve the problem? So we're not going to forcefully make it solve the problem. It goes out. Okay. Option C, the company will periodically survey its employees to determine how the introduction of AMT has affected them. Let's say this, if I'm the CEO and I'm having periodic service from my employees to check out how the introduction of AMT has affected them, how would that solve the problem? I'm just doing the survey. Oh, someone can assume that after the survey, the company might take an action, but that's not a part of this option, right? It just talks about a survey. That's out of scope of this option. Merely doing a survey periodically is not going to solve any problem. It goes out. Okay. Option D, before the introduction of AMT, the company will institute an educational program. So before they're introducing AMT, they're going to give them some sort of education, some program to inform its employees of the probable consequences of the introduction of AMT. Okay, so I have now told the employees what's going to happen to them work-wise with AMT. How is that going to solve the problem? Um, I mean, some might prepare. Okay, then no assumptions, no assumption. That's something that you should never do on the GRE. Never assume that because they would be telling the employees the probable consequences of AMT, they would be self-preparing or I don't know. Nah. Okay, so by a process of elimination, E has to be correct, but then let's read E and see if it makes any sense. Okay, so the company will ensure that it can offer its employees any training necessary for meeting their job requirement. That's a straightforward solution. Of course, if the company can ensure that, problem solved. So, what could be some possible takeaways from the question that we just solved? Well, the first one is that you have to train your brain to identify the two main classes of sentences in the paragraph argument type paragraphs. Broadly speaking, data and conclusions, or data and opinions, or data and arguments, whatever you feel more comfortable with. And you can do this by actually making two columns, just like I did for the last question. Okay, so notice how the last question did not have any argument. We just had two facts and then a question, right? But sometimes these paragraphs give you a fact, then they move to making or taking a position, to making an argument or taking a position, and they then might give you some more facts and then give you another conclusion, right? And that's why I say that you have to create a flow chart of how, in the exact chronology, the sentences are linked, right? So the structure kind of gets etched into your brain for the time period that you're solving the question for. Okay. Of course, taking written aids for at least the first 2 weeks, like I said, first 2 weeks of practice from paragraph argument type questions is necessary to bolster your incision. Basically, it will train your brain to automatically identify the two classes of text. right? And of course, as you progress through this course, I would have you develop more and more and more habits, which will basically turn your brain into a machine for the GRE. All right. And of course, after that, once you come to reading the question, you have to summarize the question in easy and concise words, or which I now call as defining an action item, a clear action item of 7 to 8 words, let's say. Like for the last one, what was the action item? What will solve the obsolescence? Yeah, obsolescence of skills. Okay. So once you, because again, sometimes they pose the question in a way which is more tortuous or more confusing than the actual paragraph, right? So if you just clearly define an action item, you would do yourself a service. The last one is never use your background knowledge. Like I could have assumed, oh, surveys lead to actions. This survey is going to solve the problem for obsolescence. Nah, not, do not do that. Never assume something or make up a story to make an option correct. Keep in mind that paragraph and the options that you're reading is all you know. You do not know anything else. And for the most part, your background knowledge is only going to trap you on the GRE, and it's going to push you into picking the wrong options. If you were not able to solve this question in your first try, relax. I was not able to solve this question in my first 2 tries, the first time I ever encountered this question. With that being said, I have come across students who are able to do it in their first try, right? So let's just discuss how you would go about it. So there are two people, Josh and Maxwell. And apparently, Josh is saying the DVD rentals nationwide together handled 10 million fewer DVD rentals in 2012 than 2011. All right, Josh is giving some information. And Josh's information will come in the information column, which is basically saying that in 2012 compared to 2011, I mean, I don't know, maybe X million were rentals were handled in 2011, and then X minus 10 million were handled in 2012. And then Josh goes on to taking a position saying that the decline in rentals was probably due almost entirely to the February 2012 launch of Netflix. Sorry. Okay, so that's a position. That's not a piece of information. That's what Josh thinks, right? So we go into the position column, and this decline, this 10 million decline, Josh says happened because Webflix happened. Webflix happened in 2012, like in the beginning of 2012. Now we do not know what he's trying to say, like why would Webflix cause that decline? Anyway, then it goes on to telling you the first and only DVD rental available that, in addition to renting DVDs, also sold them cheaply. Okay, so that's the data about Webflix. That this DVD rental, so we go back to the data column, uh, it rents, but also sells cheaply. Okay. And if it's not clear to you that Josh is trying to say that maybe people are now not renting DVDs, instead they are buying them because Webflix is selling cheaply. Why would they rent? If it's not clear to you by this point, then I think Maxwell's reply makes that clear. Because Maxwell says, and he starts by basically challenging the position of Josh, because he says that there must be another explanation. So basically, he starts by hitting it. Nope, another explanation. It's not Webflix. It's not Webflix. It didn't happen because of Webflix. Because you yourself said, he's saying to Josh, that the decline was on the order of 10 million rentals, right? You said it yourself, Josh. Yet Webflix sold only 4 million DVDs, so it goes on to giving a premise for his position that Webflix only sold 4 million DVDs. And remember how I was saying that it would become clear to you that Josh is trying to say that people are not renting DVDs. Instead of renting, they're buying them because Netflix is selling them cheaply. Becomes super clear by Maxwell's reply, because he's saying that Netflix sold only 4 million, right? So Maxwell is kind of continuing Josh's objection, or no, he is basically objecting to Josh's explanation by saying that you are implying that the rentals went down because of Webflix, because it also sold cheaply. But they also only sold 4 million. What happened to the other 6 million, right? What happened to the other 6 million is technically part of Maxwell's argument. All right. Yeah, so that's Maxwell's argument. We have understood the paragraph. Now, which of the following, if true, would most seriously weaken the objection that Maxwell presents to Josh's explanation? So basically, we have to weaken Maxwell's objection, which is kind of strengthening Josh. And if I were to turn that into an action item now, I would say that's basically you trying to pick an option which shows you have to show that Webflix caused the decline. Okay, there's no other explanation. Webflix did it. Okay, so let's read A. It says that in 2012, Webflix rented out more DVDs than it sold. Webflix sold 4 million. Let's say they rented out 4,000,001 DVDs. Just one more than they sold. How would that explain that the 6 million drop was also caused by Webflix? Because they were selling cheaply. I mean, okay, so the amount that Webflix is renting, in this case, let's say it's 4 million and one DVD, would be a part of the nationwide rentals, no? Which we know for a fact have gone down by 10 million. Now, knowing that Webflix rented out more DVDs than it sold would not help you in making any connection between the 10 million drop and Webflix. Okay, fine, it sold out more, it rented out more than it sold. But how did that cause the decline? Okay, so this goes out. Option B. In 2012, two new DVD services that rent but that do not sell DVDs became available nationwide. So how does this show? How does this show that Webflix caused the decline? This does not seem to have any link with Webflix whatsoever. So of course I'm gonna cut it out. Option C. Most of the DVD rental services in the country, most of the DVD rental services in the country rent DVDs at a discount on certain nights of the week, and that is why Webflix is responsible. If most DVD rentals are giving out DVDs at a discount, I mean, this should, if anything, this should have probably caused the rentals to go up. Again, even if it causes the rentals to go down, how can we link it to Webflix? No, it doesn't make any sense. Okay. Because the 6 million, how do you explain the 6 million with it? How do you explain the 6 million with this? I mean, Webflix sold 4 million. That should have definitely caused a decline in rentals of 4 million, but how did the other 6 million decline happen? Option D, people often buy DVDs of movies that they have previously seen in a theater, and that is why Webflix is responsible. So what's exactly happening? Are people now buying more DVDs? Okay, let's say even if they, I mean, don't assume, but let's assume for the sake of it, even if people are buying more DVDs now, are they buying from Webflix? And is that why the rental decline is happening? But then we know for sure that Webflix only sold 4 million, and the decline happened on a scale of 10. So how did the extra 6 million drop happen? So nope, by process of elimination, E has to be correct. But let's read E and see if it makes any sense. Now, if most of the people who own DVDs, of course, I mean, um, the question is which of the following, if true, would most seriously weaken the objection or would show that Webflix caused a decline. So if it is true that most of the people who own DVDs loan them to their friends on average 2 to 3 times, does that explain that Webflix caused it? Yeah, Webflix sold 4 million, right? So we already kind of subtract with that information, you already subtract 4 million from the rentals, right? Because 4 million were sold, 4 million fewer would rent DVDs. But then the 6 million was a problem, right? And if it's true that people loan DVDs to their friends on average 2 to 3 times, well, that easily covers the 6 million because this 4 million is not just 4 million technically, it's going to be 8 to 12 million people are going to get covered. So that, and you can always, you can always play the courtroom, right? You can always play the courtroom like, okay, so there's a judge in front of you, and your opinion is Josh's opinion, and my opinion is Maxwell's opinion. Your opinion is that, you give the judge, or you're trying to prove it in front of someone. Well, that's the concept of a judge. That, Webflix caused the 10 million decline that happened in 2012 in rentals, right? Uh, because it rented out DVDs, but it also sold them cheaply. And then I come in as Maxwell and I say, no, there has to be another explanation because you know what? Only 4 million DVDs were sold in 2012 by Webflix, but the decline was on the order of 10 million. Now, what can you say which would weaken my argument? Because now I have caused some confusion in judge's mind, right? The judge is like, yeah, if Webflix had caused the 10 million decline, then Webflix would have sold 10 million, but it has only sold 4. And again, Webflix is a part of the nationwide rentals, so its rentals are going to get counted in the nationwide, right? So the argument, anything saying something like Webflix rented out, 6 million or 10 million, doesn't undercut the fact that the rentals have gone down. Because again, its rentals are part of the nationwide rentals. So yeah, anyway, rewinding it back. So if I as Maxwell say that, and then you say, Judge, Your Honor, whatever lingo you want to use here, people who own DVDs loan it to their friends on average 2 to 3 times. Well, that would make sense. Okay, Webflix might have most probably caused it because it sold 4 million, and that 4 million does not just mean 4 million that the DVDs got to 4 million. They got to more people, right? And so it easily covers, or Webflix easily becomes accountable for the decline in nationwide DVD rentals. So, a possible takeaway from the last question, I was thinking about it. What could be a possible takeaway from the last question? Well, the paragraph was kind of complex, right? It was kind of tortuous. Josh was saying one thing and Maxwell was saying another, and then you had to kind of pick the implication by Josh and by Maxwell, right? And this is one practice that you would keep doing during at least the first 1 to 2 weeks, which is you would be clearly identifying the argument at hand. Like the argument at hand in the paragraph which we just solved was that nope, there was a 10 million decline. Netflix can be accountable for 4, but that 6 million cannot be linked to Web6, right? So that was a basic argument from Maxwell, right? Now, how can you clearly identifying the argument at hand? Well, one very good way is that you can do this by simply explaining to yourself what the argument is saying, right? In your native language. And I do not know how people miss this, but then I have noticed a lot of students doing it. Like they just keep thinking in English, even if even if their native language is Persian or Pashto or Shina or some other language or Arabic, right? So you have to basically play the scenario, the whole thing out as a scene, preferably in your head, in your native language, right? Do that. So you engage it with it well and you understand it well. So Islamabad's city council wants to maximize the city's average yearly expenditure. Oh, sorry, it wants to minimize. Wants to minimize. Okay, we have to be careful while we are reading. Read one word wrong, and the whole, solution attempt goes to waste. Okay, so the city's average yearly expenditure on its traffic signal lights, and so is considering replacing the incandescent bulbs currently in use with arrays of LEDs as the bulbs burn out. Okay, so as it doesn't, a lot of Pakistani and Indian students might end up uh, understanding this as because the bulbs burn out, क्योंकि bulb जल जाते हैं, but that's not the case. It says as the bulbs burn out, like they would eventually burn out. As they burn out one by one by one, we're not going to replace them with new bulbs. We're going to replace them with LEDs, right? And this idea popped up in their head because they were trying to minimize the city's average yearly expenditure, right? So average yearly expenditure, they want to bring it down. The idea in their head is that instead of bulbs, let's use LEDs. Now, why this idea popped in their head? It's none of our business. Okay, anyway. So compared to incandescent bulbs, LED arrays consume significantly less energy and cost no more to purchase. Okay, that's probably why. So, um, so there's a bulb versus LED comparison, and it says that the LED consumes less energy, bulb consumes more, and then it costs no more to purchase. So the cost is almost equal. Okay, fine, the cost is almost equal, and but then LED is using less energy. So yeah, it makes sense. It would decrease the yearly expenditure, maintenance expenditure. All right, then it says that moreover, the cost associated with the conversion of existing fixtures so as to accept LED errors would be minimal. Okay, fine. Like you have to pull the bulb in a fixture. You have to put the LED in a fixture. So of course, if you are going to put LEDs eventually, you would need to change the fixture, and of course, and it's giving you some extra pro LED information that fixture replacement cost is also going to be minimal, right? So fixture replacement cost is also going to be minimal. Of course, I'm not going to write whole sentences and words. This is just to make my mind engage with it better and to understand the structure. All right, so far, there's no argument, there's no position. It's just a bunch of facts which make it look like that switching to LEDs from bulbs would be a good idea. Okay, what does the question want us to do? So which of the following would it be most useful to know in determining whether switching to LED arrays would be likely to help minimize Islamabad's yearly maintenance costs? Okay, so basically, what else do we need to know to make this decision, basically, to decide? Okay, like what additional information would be helpful in deciding if going from bulbs to LEDs would be a good idea or not? Okay, let's see if A would be helpful. So A, would it be helpful to know that whether the expected service life of LED arrays is at least as long as that of the currently used incandescent bulbs? Would it be helpful to know if they have at least that much life or not? I think yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to minimize the yield expenditure. And though LEDs consume less energy, but if they burn out every second day, that's not really helpful. Like the yearly expenditure maintenance, the average yearly expenditure would probably go up higher. So it's a good option. I'm not going to pick it right away. You never do that on the GRE. If it's a very good option, like A makes, I'm pretty sure that A would help. If you know whether LED's expected life is at least as long as the bulbs, that would help. Let's, like we say in Urdu, ruko zara, ठहरो. So let's read the rest of the options. So B is whether any cities have switched from incandescent lights in their traffic signals. Incandescent lights is incandescent bulbs, okay, to lighting elements other than LED arrays. So if we are told that another city, let's say Kabul, shifted from incandescent bulbs to something other than LEDs, how would that help us in determining whether we should go from bulbs to LEDs? Like the question here is not if we should go from bulbs to something else. The question is specifically if we should go from bulbs to LEDs, right? So knowing if some other city shifted from bulbs to something else, something other than LEDs, would not really. But compare it with A, it's useless. It's completely useless. How would this tell us this if we should go to LED errors? Of course, you can assume and make a story. Okay, if Kabul went from uh, using bulbs to using some neon light or some other form of light, that means you should not go to LEDs. You should probably go to neon lights. Again, that's an assumption. That's you making a story. That's you doing something that the GRE wants you to do in order to make you lose points. So do not do that. Option C. Okay, would it help us to know whether the company from which Islamabad currently buys incandescent bulbs for traffic signals also sells LED arrays? I mean, if they're not selling it, someone else might. Okay, that's an assumption, but yeah, I have, I have it as a fact that the cost is minimal. The cost is it costs no more to purchase, so it's either equal or slightly less. Yeah, slightly less. It doesn't cost any more. So even if they're not selling it, someone else would. And again, if I compare it with A is much more helpful. If they're not selling it, someone else might. And we know for a fact that the cost is minimal. Okay, right. Um, that's why I would rule it out. Okay. D, whether Islamabad City Council plans to increase the number of traffic signal lights in Islamabad. Let's say if they plan to increase it, how would that help us in deciding if we should go to LEDs or not? Let's say they do not plan to increase it. I mean, the question is still, or the aim is still decreasing the yearly maintenance cost. So if they had 1,000 signal lights, regardless of whether they're going to go to 2,000 or stay at 1,000, the aim is still the same. You have to decrease the yearly. Like maybe with, even if they're going from 1,000 to 2,000 lights, the question is the same. Should we switch to LEDs or should we stay at bulbs? What would be more cost effective yearly, right? So yeah, this is not going to help you. All right, so whether the crews that currently replace incandescent bulbs in Islamabad's traffic signals know how to convert the existing fixtures so as to accept LEDs. Okay, even if those crew do not, we already know for a fact that the conversion, the fixture conversion cost is going to be minimal. They don't, someone else might. That's a one-time cost. They're concerned with the yearly expenditure, the average yearly expenditures, right? So option A makes the more sense. You knowing whether LEDs live for as long as the bulb does would definitely help you in determining if it's a good idea to go from bulbs to LEDs in order to minimize the city's average yearly expenditures on traffic lights. So one day I was sitting under a tree and I was thinking, what could be the possible takeaways from the questions we just solved? Just kidding, it didn't happen like that. So, what could be the possible takeaways from the question which we just solved? I think the last question had a lot of room for swaying the reader away from the matter at hand. And the matter at hand was strictly shifting from bulbs to LEDs to minimize the yearly cost, right? So bulbs to anything else was irrelevant. Um, Anything not related to yearly cost was irrelevant because, one-time cost like fixture replacement was irrelevant. The question whether the existing sellers also sell LEDs was irrelevant, right? So yeah, you'll have to strictly stay on the matter at hand in these questions. It was impossible for me to turn the video on for this question because there's so much text. Even if I had turned the video on, you would not be able to see the beauty that I am. So sorry, I'm gonna make you miss that. Let's read the paragraph. The rate of health complications of patients on intravenous IV therapy at a particular hospital were higher than usual. All right, so that's a piece of information that patients at IV therapy at some particular hospital were facing a lot of health complications. It was higher than usual. Now, what happened afterwards is that the government inspectors found that the typical IV solutions used in this hospital had somewhat high concentrations of sodium and potassium, which were raising patients' blood pressure and taxing their kidneys. All right, so that's also a piece of information. There's no position or argument there. It's all facts. So what happens afterwards is that they found that these IV solutions had higher, and pardon me for this, but I'm just going to write Na and K for sodium and potassium. My apologies to people who do not have a science background. So anyway, so this was doing something bad to their blood pressure and kidneys. Okay, yeah, it seems like they figured it out. Why was it happening? But then what's the rest of the paragraph about? Okay, so the government inspectors mandated lowering the sodium and the potassium in these IV preparations, okay, and threatened with a possible government fine. So they basically told them that we'll fine you, um, lower these levels. Okay. And in compliance, the hospital did lower the sodium and potassium levels in the IV solutions to the correct levels. Okay. And in compliance, the hospital, I'm not going to write the full form of it, basically corrected the sodium and potassium levels. Nevertheless, patients on IV therapy at that hospital continued to have a high rate of health complications. Okay, despite this happening, the health complications continued. So yeah, even after reading the paragraph, there's a question. Why? What happened? Like, what was actually going on? Alright, so which of the following, if true, most helps to explain why acting on the government inspector's recommendations failed to achieve its goal? Okay, a very fancy way of saying what I was already wondering about. So why? Okay, or like more like what was actually going on? What was actually going on? Like why, despite them fixing the sodium and potassium levels, the health complications continued. So what was actually going on, or you could say, uh, 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 like what was, or okay, let's make it more direct. Why didn't why didn't the correction, and by the correction I am referring to the sodium and potassium level correction, why didn't the correction fix things? Yeah, I think that's better. Okay, now let's read the options. Does option A, if true, tells us why didn't the correction fix things? Let's see. And I mean, sometimes it's a good practice to just take a moment, pause, and think about the type of option that you could be looking for. Like for instance, here I can think that maybe the problem wasn't really the sodium and potassium levels. Maybe it was the wards. It was the wards where they were giving IV solutions to their patients. Maybe the wards were filthy. Maybe the problem is not even the wards. Maybe it's the nurses. It's the nurse department that's causing all the problems. Maybe instead of the concentration of the sodium and potassium and the IV preparations is not the problem. Maybe the nurses are very rude and they're mishandling the patients, and that is why they are facing more health complications than usual on while taking an IV therapy. Also, maybe the staff isn't trained well and they are, instead of giving, for example, 1 liter of IV, they are giving 4 liters of it. And so the problem wasn't really the concentration. The problem was the amount that they were giving to the patients, right? So that's the type of the option that we're looking for. But let's read what the options actually are saying. Okay, so if it's true that the change in IV solution procedure meant a number of related legal documents had to be renegotiated and rewritten at great cost, and this is why the correction didn't fix things. I mean, how are the patients affected by a lengthy procedure where they had to renegotiate and rewrite legal documents at great cost? I mean, if anything, they should be affecting the health of the hospital owner. Okay, anyway, no, that's me basically saying I do not see any link with this and why the problem persisted. Okay, and the question why the problem persisted. Anyway, coming to option B, when sodium and potassium levels in the blood fall below their baseline level, it can damage cells throughout the body by reverse osmosis. So when it happens, it can. So there are two conditions. So first, I'll have to assume that it is happening, that sodium and potassium levels in the blood are indeed falling below their baseline levels. But do I have any basis for that assumption? I actually do not, because in fact, the passage is saying that they were corrected to the right levels, not that they were lowered this time around to below the baseline level. But okay, fine. Even if this is happening, it says it can damage cells throughout the body by reverse osmosis. It can. It's not a sure. It does not say it always will do that. So first I have to assume that the sodium and potassium levels are falling below, and then I have to assume that they're falling below and they're also damaging the body by reverse osmosis. So yeah, there's a lot fishy with this, but then I mean, if for the lack of a better option, I might end up picking this, so let's just put it in a maybe. Option C says that it is typical for a patient's appetite to increase to healthy level once they have complicated a course of IV therapy, and that is why they continue to have complications on IV therapy. What? I mean, it's talking about something that happens after IV therapy. We are concerned by what's happening during IV therapy. Okay, so it's clearly irrelevant.
Option D, 90% of patients at this hospital are older. Okay. And older patients are vulnerable to infections that can accompany IVs, and this is why they continue to face health complications on. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. If this is true, then I mean, like again, play a real life scenario. I'm the officer in charge, right? And I send you to the hospital to report to me and tell me why are they having such high health complications on IV therapy. And then you come back to me and you say that, okay, I found out that they had higher amounts of sodium and potassium in their IV preparations, and I tell you to get it fixed, and you tell the hospital to get it fixed, and hospital tells you they are fixed, but then the hospital comes to you again that, oh, the problem persists, and you come back to me and you now need to give me an answer. Why, despite acting upon your recommendation, the problem wasn't fixed? And if you tell me that 90% officer, 90% of patients at this hospital are older and older patients are vulnerable to infections that can accompany IV, that's a very good explanation. That's a very good explanation. So between B and D, I'm definitely going to cross B out. I would vote for, and that's the beauty of elimination method, right? I was confused. I was like, maybe B is true, but now, of course, between B and D, D is truer. Makes much more sense. I do not have to assume anything. Um, because even if B is true, I have to assume that this might be happening, and then that might be happening. But if D is true, I don't have to assume anything, right? If D is true, then it makes sense. The 9% of patients at this hospital are older and they are vulnerable, naturally vulnerable to infections that accompany IVs. Okay, but let's see if E is a truer option. So E says that because the findings were published in the news, some patients have chosen to use another hospital in the region, and that's why the patients left in the hospital on IV therapy are facing continue to face health complication. That doesn't make sense. Like what's happening? Are they sad because they left? Okay, no, doesn't make sense. E is for sure the correct option.
So, after solving the last question, I was thinking that a possible takeaway, and I do not know why I put S in the slide. So, a possible takeaway from that question could be that it really helps you if you play the scenario in your head. It makes answering the question considerably easier. Like the moment, so when I was solving it in real time, I just played the scenario in my head. Okay, fine. If I am the officer and I send some person to the hospital to get stuff done, and they come back, but it's still not done, what could they say or what could they tell me which would satisfy me as a logical person that, okay, fine, so your action or your recommendation did not work because of this, right? And that's what I was looking for. So yeah, play the scenario in your head really helps. I'll be honest, the first time I tried this question, I just did not know what to do. And that was the case the second time I tried it, and then that was the case the third time I tried it. Basically, I could not solve it no matter how hard I tried. And I've been teaching the GRE since 2018. I think I've seen only 2 students out of like 1,000 maybe who have been able to solve this. But then once you know how to go about such questions, they become super easy for you. They teach you very clear lessons for the GRE. They give you very good lessons for the GRE, rather. Let's read the paragraph. In Peyton City, days are characterized as having heavy rainfall, and then they've given you a definition for that, that is more than 2 inches. Moderate rainfall, which is more than 1 inch but no more than 2 inches. And then light rainfall, which is at least a trace but no more than 1 inch. And of course, no rainfall, which would be no rainfall, zero rainfall. All right, so that's some information, and then it gives you some more information by telling you that in 1990 there were fewer days, and I think that this is where one should, because this paragraph is very, for me at least, it was a bundle of confusing informations. Not confusing, like it was hard for me to structure because there were ranges in the information. So yeah, I found it easier to maybe make a table for these, right? So heavy rainfall, moderate rainfall, light, was it right rainfall? Yeah, light rainfall, and of course no rainfall. Heavy rainfall was when it was above 2 inches, moderate was when it was between 1 and 2, light rainfall was when it was between 1 and 0, no rainfall was, of course, when there was no rainfall. Okay, and then they have done a comparison. They've done a comparison of 2 years, 2 different years. One of them is 19, one of them is 1990 and the other one is 1910. It says that in 1990 there were fewer days with light rainfall than in 1910. Okay, so for light rainfall in 1990 there were fewer days than they were in 1910. So that's to say, if there were X days for light rainfall, then there were less than X days for light rainfall in 1990. Okay, and fewer with moderate rainfall. So even the moderate rainfall days were fewer. So if they were Y here, they were less than Y here. Again, this is not the amount of rain, it's number of days. And then it says, yet total rainfall for the year was 20% higher in 1990 than in 1910, right? So the total rain, if it was T here, it was 20% higher. Or if it was 100 here, it was 20% higher. It was 120 inches. Okay, so, okay, fine. I would not even tell you what I was thinking the first or second or third time I was solving it, or what I eventually realized, because let's just go to the question, then go to the options, and I will basically unleash the knowledge in bits and pieces. So if the statements above are true, then it is also possible that in Peyton City, so basically you have to pick an option. If you have to pick an option, which is also possible, pick another possibility. Pick another possibility. I think the question here is super easy. You do not even need an action item for it. But still, okay. Is it possible that the number of days with heavy rainfall was lower in 1990 than in 1910? I did not pick this option the first time. And the reason why I did not pick this was because I was thinking in my head that, okay, the days here were less than the days there.
The days for light rainfall in 1990 were less than the days for light rainfall in 1910. So of course, heavy rainfall might be making up for the increased rain because 1990 received more rain overall. But I forgot that days does not mean amount of rain, right? So is it possible that the days with heavy rainfall was lower in 1990 than in 1910? Absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, that's the correct option as well. And you might be thinking, probably screaming at the screen, how? Here's how. So let's say there were 10 days for heavy rainfall in 1990, and then there were 12 there, right? But then the definition of heavy rainfall is 2 plus, right? Maybe on these 10 days, 100 inches fell. Is that possible? Yeah. And on these 12 days, only 10 inches fell. And that's 120. So you can still have considerably more rain in 1990, even if the number of days with heavy rainfall were fewer. Okay. So yeah, A is possible, but then of course I know that's not gonna satisfy you. You have picked an option and you want me to prove it to you why that is wrong. I'm gonna do just that. Option B says that the number of days with some rainfall but no more than 2 inches. So that to me sounds like some rainfall but no more than 2 inches. Sounds like the combined definition for light and moderate. Okay, for light and moderate. It says that these days were the same in 1990 as in 1910. We have the data telling us that that's not the case, right? For 1910, these days would be less than y plus less than x. For 1910, they would be y plus x. So that would be greater. They're not the same. All right, it goes against the data. So any option which negates data, we have to check options against the data. And if they go against the data, they're incorrect. B is incorrect and C is incorrect for the same reason, because again it talks about the same type of days, the number of days with some rainfall but no more than 2 inches. Again, that to me is the combined definition of moderate and light rainfall days. And it says it was higher in 1990 than in 1910. It completely contradicts the information because it was actually lower. The sum, as I told you, this is actually lower than the number of days for light and moderate rainfall in 1910, right? So yeah, it's just saying the exact opposite of what data is saying, so it's incorrect. D was the option which I picked, and I'm pretty sure a lot of students would pick option D after solving this question. But let me first refute E. So E is easy to refute because um, the average amount of rainfall per month was lower in 1990 than in 90. How is that even possible? If the total rainfall, let's say, for 1990 was 120, 20% higher, and for 1910 it was 100. Or okay, fine. If you don't want to pick numbers, go for what I did earlier, 1.2 T and T, right? How can the average per month be lower in 1990? Because what's the average? The average is the total divided by 12. Total divided by 12. Of course, if the numerator is bigger, well, I mean, the overall answer would be bigger. So yeah, E is absurd. I picked D the first time and the second time. And then the third time I was like, okay, if D is incorrect, what is it? I couldn't make sense of any other option. I was kind of inclined towards A, okay, B and C and E clearly doesn't make sense. It might be A, but then I was unable to prove it to myself. That being said, let's come down to disproving D. D has a problem. And the problem basically originates with a mathematical assertion. It says the total number of inches of rain that fell on days with moderate rainfall, right, in 1990 was more than thrice what it had been in 1910. If I think about it, right, when the data was given to me originally, it did, pops in your head that maybe if the total rain for 1990 is higher, And 1990 still has fewer days with moderate rainfall and light rainfall. There must be something happening in the heavy rainfall days, on the heavy rainfall days, or moderate is a range. It's 1 to 2. Maybe the days with moderate rainfall in 1990 are receiving more rainfall. Maybe each day is receiving 1.99 inches, and for 1990 each day is receiving just 1.001 on average, right? So that's quite possible. But then so I'm basically agreeing this. Yes, moderate rainfall days could be less in 1990 and still cause more rain, right? But then there's a mathematical assertion in this question. It says that it was more than thrice. And then my then GRE guru taught me that now I got it incorrect myself. But then I eventually realized that this is not even mathematically possible. And why is that? Okay, let's go for extremes, for example. Like there is 365 days in a year. So let's say, I mean, we know for sure that in 1990, there were fewer days with moderate rainfall. So let's say, let's try to, basically, I'm trying to maximize moderate rainfall in 1990, right? So I can pick 364 days out of 365 because again, we cannot go against the data, right? The days in 1990 have to be higher, right? And a year has 365 days. I know, a leap year has 366, but yeah, let's just park that. So 364, and let's say, so that's the maximum number of days, and let's say it was receiving 1.99 inches each day, right? So that is what was happening in 1990, right? Just mathematically checking if this is if the rain because of moderate rainfall days in 1990 can actually be more than thrice. We know it can be more than what it was in 1910, but can it be more than thrice what it had been in 1910? That's a mathematical assertion. Okay, so for 1910, you have 365 days. I mean, because the days have to be more. As per the data, the days were more in 1910. And what's the lowest you can pick? I can think of 001, and of course you can pick lower, but yeah, this should give you a fair idea. So 364 times 1.99, what does that give you? This gives you 724.36. And what does that give you? 365 times 1.001, 365 something 0.36. All right, so this answer is not even the thrice of that, even when I tried making this answer as big as possible. So let alone more than thrice of it. It's not even mathematically possible. Now, you might ask yourself, how would we know if we should be doing all this stuff on the actual GRE? Well, if you were listening, I mentioned the phrase mathematical assertion, right? So there's a mathematical assertion. If it had said it was more than what it had been in 1910, it would have been totally possible. Both A and D would have been possible. And of course, GRE does not put you in such a scenario for paragraph argument type questions. But then it has an assertion, a mathematical assertion that it was more than thrice. Whenever you read extreme language in options, like a mathematical assertion, test it. Option A is correct. So what are the possible takeaways now? Of course, always test mathematical assertion, and elimination method is one of your best friends on the GRE because again, some options can be true, but then others can be truer, and you have to pick the best option. And I do not want you to keep vacillating or going from one option to another and doing that back and forth and wasting time, raising your anxiety on the actual test. And yeah, I also want you to be clearly eliminating the wrong options, right? So they should just stay out of the competition. All right, so you can check if an option goes against data, like two options did in the last question. If it does, it is simply wrong for the paragraph argument type question, right? If it's going against data, and if paragraph is your main source of information, then of course it's wrong. Just disregard it. And of course, do not decide on options fate before properly entertaining it. And this is not something you might have actually realized so far. That being said, yeah, it's quite possible that you have already, but then I want you to entertain each option, right? Each option, like read each option and decide whether it's correct or not before just saying, okay, this seems correct. I'm going to pick this. I'm not going to read the rest. However, that being said, in the 6th or 7th week of your preparation, you would be in a position where you can just know what the correct option is. But like I said in the beginning of this lesson, you have to form the right neural patterns, the right habits, right? So yeah, do not decide an option's fate before properly entertaining it, reading it. You will misperform if you go in with a bias, right? If you just go in with a bias of saying that, okay, this is correct because of this, I'm just going to pick this. This seems correct, I'm going to pick this. I'm not even going to read the rest. Do not do that. Entertain each option. In the last decade, there has been a significant decrease in coffee consumption. All right. So, coffee consumption has gone down in the last 10 years. All right. And during the same time, there has been increasing publicity about the adverse long-term effects on health of the caffeine in coffee. Right, so there's another fact that during the same time, during the same 10 years, where the coffee consumption have gone down, there has been increased publicity about the adverse long-term effects on health of the caffeine, which is found in coffee. Okay, so caffeine's bad effects on health, right? So there have been some ads on this. Does it say publicity? I mean, yeah, yeah. Okay, fine. Publicity ads on these adverse effect. All right. Anyway, this is all information, and then it says therefore. Keywords like therefore, hence, just tell me that yeah, there's an argument coming. Therefore, the decrease in coffee consumption must have been caused by consumers' awareness of the harmful effects of caffeine. See, that's not information. That's the argument of the paragraph or the author, right? So basically, the author is saying that this coffee must have come down because of the awareness, or as I chose to call it, ads. Okay, right. So there was some publicity that okay, this caffeine is bad. Caffeine is bad, which is found in coffee, and yeah. And at the same time, coffee consumption saw a sharp a significant drop, right? And the author says that it happened because of that publicity where you were telling people that, okay, caffeine is bad for you. We do not have any proof for that. It's the author's argument, like I said. Okay, so now let's read the question. Which of the following, if true, most seriously calls into question the explanation above? Action item is what are we trying to do? We are calling to action this explanation, right? The argument, or we are weakening it. We are weakening that coffee consumption went down because of ads. So basically, yeah, find an alternative reason, right? So we are basically something else caused the drop. Something else caused the drop in coffee consumption. Okay, so we have to pick an option which shows that. So let's read A. On average, people consume 30% less coffee today than they did 10 years ago. I mean, that's just quantifying the fact, right? We already know that drink, less people now drink coffee compared to 10 years ago. And this just gives you a quantification of that 30% less coffee consumers are there than there were 10 years ago. But the question is again, the action is to pick something which shows that something else caused the drop in coffee consumption, not these ads, not what the author is saying. That's not true, probably. There's some other reason. Okay, so yeah, B, A is absurd. It's not even, yeah, it does nothing. B, so heavy coffee drinkers may have mild withdrawal symptoms such as headaches for a day or so after significantly decreasing their coffee consumption. So because their withdrawal symptoms are less, the coffee consumption is going down, and that's why it's not going down because of the ads. But I mean, what are the withdrawal symptoms of water? Why aren't people leaving water? Anyway, okay, let's not do that. Heavy coffee drinkers may have mild withdrawal symptoms such as headaches for a day. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, but then I cannot clearly leave it, so let's just put it in a maybe. Let's be efficient with time. C. Sales of specialty types of coffee have held steady as sales of regular brands have declined. It's a fancier way of saying that overall sales have declined, which we already know, but we are looking for something which shows that no, it did not happen because of the publicity, but something else was happening. So yeah, C is definitely incorrect. It's just rephrasing a fact. Option D, the consumption of fruit juices and caffeine-free herbal teas has increased over the past decade. The word caffeine-free, I mean, the consumption of fruit juices is irrelevant, but the part where it says that the consumption of caffeine-free herbal teas has increased, me tells me shows to me that yeah, people are indeed moving away from caffeine uh, options, caffeinated drinks rather, right? They're moving towards caffeine free ones. So yeah, that could do the opposite of what the question is. Again, the question is asking you to show that something else caused the drop. But if you pick D, then you bolster what the author says. The author says coffee consumption went down because of these ads, which were telling people that, okay, these are the adverse effects of caffeine. And then if people are actually leaving caffeine drinks, then yeah, there might be some truth to it. And that's not what we are doing. This is doing the exact opposite of what the question is asking you to do. We are trying to pick an option which tells us, no, it was not probably because of the publicity slash ads slash whatever you want to call it. It happened because of something else, right? If you pick D, it kind of puts the blame partially in a way on the ads on the publicity, right? By saying that people are moving to caffeine-free options. So particularly they're leaving caffeine, right? So yeah, that would give you more reason to link the ads. Anyway, if anything, option D is not correct. Option E says that coffee prices increased steadily in the past decade because of unusually severe frosts in coffee growing nations, and that might be the reason for the drop in coffee consumption and not the ads. Makes perfect sense. It gives you a counter reason, and if you compare it with B is just absurd compared to E. Like even if heavy coffee drinkers have mild withdrawal symptoms such as headaches for a day or so after significantly decrease their coffee consumption, the question is, what is prompting them to do it in the first place, right? And author's argument was that it's probably the publicity, it's the ads. Okay, but the question of what is prompting them to do it is completely unaddressed with B. Maybe if I had read B better, I would have eliminated it then and there. E is the best option. E is the correct option. All right, so what could be some possible takeaways? Well, if the question asks you to pick an option that strengthens or weakens the given argument, like it did in the paragraph argument question that you just solved, you have to keep an eye for options that are merely rephrasing the facts and rule them out, right? Like option A was saying that the drop is on a scale of 30%. I mean, we already know that there's a drop. We have to strengthen, so when we have to strengthen or weaken the argument, what we are trying to do is pick an option which is something additional to the facts, right? Of course, the author builds the argument on a premise of facts, right? We cannot pick an option and so an option which is just rephrasing the facts is doing nothing. It's just technically part of the premise, right? We are looking for something additional. So yeah. And then there was another option as well. I think there was an option we was telling you that of one type of coffee has gone down in sales and the other type is steady. I mean, that's also a fancier way of saying that overall coffee consumption has went down. We already know that. Why was the question? Okay. Yeah, this could be a possible takeaway from this. Again, I put an S. Sorry for that. Also, it's getting dark. See you in the next lesson.